Alright, so I'm late on the whole Starfield devs calling the game realistic because most planets are literally barren pieces of rock. But they did get me thinking. Technically speaking, they are right, aren't they? In real life, I suppose most planets would be barren and lifeless, like Mars or Venus. Todd is probably sitting there gloating on his...
Mr. White! Yes, science!
But, so what? The devs may be technically correct, but do video games need to be realistic? And how much realism is too much realism? Well, if you want the answer to both of those questions, I suggest you watch ahead. Before we get started, let me clarify something that might have popped up in your head like it did mine. Does realism mean more immersion? Or does realism mean the same thing as immersion? Well, actually no, and here's where the immersion/realism debate starts to get a little muddy. See, many people confuse a game being immersive to a game being realistic. Because, let's say if it's very realistic, it can completely immerse you to the point that you think you aren't even playing a game. That is not true. Oh no, another thing the mass gaming audience is wrong about. Anyway, I direct you to watch this video by the Game Grumps, which sums up and answers this debate extremely well. The main point of the video is that there is no correlation or causation between a video game feeling/looking realistic to a video game feeling immersive. In fact, that is actually impossible and goes against why we make video games. We want video games to be a representation of reality, not reality itself. That is art. Oh, by the way, this painting is from my other channel, so if you're interested, please go check it out using the link above. And if you enjoyed this video or found it informative, please do like and subscribe. Moving on. Also, because the level of technology, detail, and sensory information you will need to transmit to a person is nigh on impossible given current technological standards. My condolences to you Sword Art Online and virtual hentai degenerates. Your dreams are still a bit far off for now. But you can still hope. If the Zuck fancies himself a bit of... you can bet he'll definitely get some poor meta developers on it. RIP. Because of this fact, there are only two types of immersion possible for video games right now. Environmental, which is your aesthetics, the surface level detail, the contextual design of the game, the narrative, the story, and so on. This type of immersion is found in other mediums such as books. If you build a world really well while weaving it into your writing, you can't help but feel you've been transported to another world. Oh no, son of a... The other type is mechanical. This is something that is purely applicable to video games. This is the flow state you get when you're playing a really well-designed game. Think like Neon White or Doom in the FPS category, Soulsborne and Monster Hunter games in third-person action categories, or like a really good roguelike such as Risk of Rain or Dead Cells. You know when you play a game and completely forget that you have a controller or mouse and keyboard in your hands? Or when someone says the game has tight controls? You forget that you have to press buttons because the brain creates bridges from it to the action in-game directly. This is mechanical immersion, where the game's design, logic, and input optimization are done so well that you don't have to think about taking any action in-game. But why did I go from realism to immersion? Well, replay the prior minutes and you'll notice something. Realism is not a factor in any type of immersion, be it environmental or mechanical. There's our answer to the first question I proposed. Video games, in fact, do not need to be realistic at all. If you want gamers to appreciate your game and feel immersed, focusing on making a game realistic will neither help nor deter you from that goal. It just is, because when players engage with the game, they are engaging with the essence of it. Like I said, the game's design, the game's logic, the game's lore, the game's narrative input. Not some surface level BS where, wow, your game is so realistic that I got diabetes from eating too many snack bars to recover my health. I feel so immersed, thank you. Which brings us back to the Starfield discussion. Listen, I know it was the devs being lazy and that I don't need to take them so seriously, but I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's say the devs really did set out to make Starfield more realistic and therefore more immersive by having loads of barren rocks to land on. Mechanical immersion doesn't apply here, so what about environmental? I mean, I guess, technically speaking. But then, if that's the realism they are shooting for, doesn't that mean that the flying would need to be handled by a brigade and mission control? Or landing and takeoff would need to be complex procedures that would probably require mini-games to complete successfully? Wait a minute, if we are focusing on this aspect, how the hell is the main plot happening? Wait. How did humans begin to fly in space in the first place? This isn't realistic, this is fiction. You know the phi in sci-fi? It's fiction. You have to suspend your disbelief at some points, otherwise all video games would be Manuel Samuel. Oh god, the controller is so weird. It's a Z.
Good job, Sam.
Why isn't it WASD?
You're very good at existing.
But it's Z and C. Okay. C, Z, C, and how did that glass not break? Oh, hi Karen. Oh, what the? What is that? Oh, okay, I gotta blink. I'm blind and crippled. I mean, seriously, walking is complex. How are we pressing a button and moving forward? It takes immense balance to walk. It's literally the human body falling over and catching itself again and again. Ever have vertigo? Yeah, that's the ears malfunctioning and we can't walk with our legs because of it. You see the problem here? There's no point in making a game realistic for the sake of it, because that can apply to everything, and then all you'll have is basically a real-life simulator where you can't even walk easily. Aren't we playing games to escape reality? Let's imagine for a second if some of our beloved video games tried to be more realistic. Can you imagine if in GTA 5 you had to strictly follow traffic laws? Because just like in real life, if you don't, you'll be the next high-speed chase guy on TV. Yeah, traffic law isn't a joke. Now, imagine you have to sit through hours of LA traffic just to get to the next mission location. That's definitely realistic, you can say, but what is the point? Is this story about this guy who's losing his mind sitting in traffic, or is this Grand Theft freaking Auto? This realism does not benefit any sense of immersion, especially environmental. It will completely break the pacing and draw people out of the game rather than draw them in. Or let's say Doom was made more realistic by having to stop the action and heal using a medkit. If you've ever played Doom, you know there's a flow state you enter when you just become a ball of bloodlust and kill everything that even dares to move. This is in part environmental immersion, but it is mostly mechanical because the controls are simple and the game is drawing you into the gunplay. If you had to stop the action and heal, it would completely disrupt that flow and therefore make the game less mechanically immersive. Or let's talk about fantasy games, and they're out the window because nothing is real at all in them. Let's talk about realistic first-person shooters. Let's say both Call of Duty and Battlefield were basically Rainbow Six Siege and Tarkov, where you're dead in a bullet or two. Or if there were no checkpoints in the campaign, instead when you die, you were transported to an infirmary and had to walk all the way back. Again, it is realistic, but goddamn would it be a slog. Also think about this. How many people play Call of Duty or Battlefield versus Rainbow Six Siege and Tarkov? Keep this point in mind, because I'll come back to this in a bit. But it's not like you shouldn't make a game realistic, but there needs to be a point to it, otherwise it'll just break the immersion as illustrated. Let's say Starfield's barren planets really were designed like that, to give that expansive and empty feeling of space and the nothingness within it. I believe then the entire journey and narrative of Starfield would have to solely refocus on this aspect, and not you know what. It would have to be like Death Stranding or Journey, where the journey is more important than the destination or focal plot points. Trudging through barren planet after planet would have some payoff at the end that satisfies you either narratively or with something unique in terms of gameplay. But this does not mean that barren planets are designed willy-nilly. They need to be purposely designed. Yeah, even if you want to put nothing, it needs to be planned, or it will be nothing and bad at the same time. If those barren journeys weren't designed with intent, they would again become pointless and immersion breaking, and frankly, utterly boring. Intent. That word. I guess that's the thesis of this entire video. Anything you do needs to be done intently and purposefully. Whatever you are placing needs to consider environmental and mechanical immersion, and those are pinned by logical flows, through lines, and consistency in both narrative and gunplay. Otherwise, Leave the realism debate at the door, please. It won't matter. Your game will still suck regardless. Lastly, I want to talk about a game I played recently that is the best illustrative of this entire video. Outward Definitive Edition. If anyone has played this game, you know how realistic this game is. Bloody hell, you eat stale food, you get indigestion, which then can only be cured by a specific type of tea. And you can only make this tea if you have the recipe or brute force it with experimenting with different ingredients. Yeah, it's that type of game. And honestly, I sort of love it and sort of hate it. Everything becomes magnified. Oh no, I'm cold. Oh god, I need to find warmth or I'll get infected. Or yes, I managed to beat 2 measly bandits after 5 grueling minutes. You see what I mean? Every small victory and every minuscule threat becomes enlarged, which brings with it a certain level of deep immersion and exhilaration. Through environmental immersion, because in the game, if you get sick, exhausted or are bleeding, you feel it. But also mechanically, because you manage all your weapons, inventory, ailments, everything like you would if you had them in real life. You keep a tight count on your inventory, you have a backpack that you have to let go before combat, you keep an eye on if you're too cold or too hot, and many other things. Everything here is done intently and purposefully. It's realistic with all the harsh realities because it's designed to make you feel how a fantasy adventure would feel like in real life. This is how the realism meshes with the design philosophy of the game, and it's not shoehorned in there. However, the flip side to this, as you may have guessed, is that it becomes a very, very long game. I don't mean replayable. I mean, let's say you want to go to a dungeon that is marked on the far west side of the map, while you are starting out in the east. You can't fast travel, nor do you have a horse or caravan. Also, you can't sprint all the way there because the game has a permanent burning feature where if your health or stamina gets burned by being used too much, you'll have to sleep to recover it. And you have to keep a safety margin for any surprise bandit or hyena encounters. So you have to literally walk all the way there and back if you die. I have a full-time job. I'm also doing this YouTube thing. I also have a personal life, family, and many other things. When I game, I love being immersed, but is it worth having 75% of my playtime walking from one place to another or recovering from the cold when I spend 2 hours in commute for work or get sick in flu season in reality? Frankly speaking, I'm a bit conflicted about that, and for now, I don't know. I do love the game, but then it tires me out pretty quickly. Yet many people don't find it worth the effort, which is why you see that the game has mixed reviews on Steam, even though some reviewers will be gushing over it. And that's where our second question comes in. Can video games be too realistic? Yes, they can be, and if they are, you are going to divide the audience very quickly. Casual gamers just don't have time for that, and I would say maybe 70% of gamers don't, but some people live for that. So if you do make your game be ultra realistic, first inculcate it into the design philosophy of your game with intent, and second consider which audience or niche you want your game to be for. Otherwise, video games don't need to be realistic at all.